Hey everybody, I just wanted to welcome you to our annual MLK service here at Calvary. This is a long-standing tradition of our church. We believe it is the right and appropriate thing to do as a faith community to honor one of the great prophets of our country's history. Dr. King is so relevant today, perhaps more than any other day in these years that we've been holding this service. And those were all relevant. But as you know, our nation is deeply divided, and these are difficult days. So we want to welcome you to our service tonight, where we ask ourselves, what would Dr. King say today, and the impact of some of his quotes, some of his thoughts, as we continue his work, and hopefully we are continuing his work and are committed to that work. So God bless you. Thank you for joining in. It's a little different this year. Obviously, we'd all love to be in person, but we're doing what we can, and let's keep the faith. Amen.
Good evening. My name is S.T. Jameson Jr., and I am a member of Calvary Church, and I've been a member there for 30 years now. And this is our continuing celebration of Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King's life, and his astounding major contribution to social justice in this country. And I want to connect it to what has taken place at the Capitol, or what took place at the Capitol on January 6th, a large mob attacking the Capitol. I want to connect the dots to American history. This is not some pundits are saying that this is something unusual. It is not unusual at all. It has happened innumerable times throughout our history. In 1961, actually May 21st, 1961, at the Montgomery First Baptist Church, 6,000, an angry mob of 6,000 whites surrounded that particular black church. The pastor was the Reverend Ralph Abernathy, who was an associate of the Reverend King's, and they were hosting the Freedom Riders. The Freedom Riders had come into Montgomery, and they were met by hundreds of whites who attacked them with bricks, bottles, and pipes. These Freedom Riders, brave Freedom Riders, suffered tremendous beatings that, as they attempted to integrate public transportation or interstate transportation. And so the parishioners at this church invited the Freedom Riders to come as a means of encouraging them, a celebration. And they were in this church, and white segregationists or whites knew that they were in that church, and so they surrounded the church and began to demand that Martin Luther King come out and face them. There were children in the church. There were about 1,000 people in the church. The mob began to throw bricks into the church. They began to tighten the circle around the church and get closer to the church. And they also began to shoot into the church. And during this time, the black parishioners and the black people in the church began to lie down on the pews, that they were frightened. And at that time, most whites in the South were segregationists. And I would say that most whites in the United States were segregationists. It might have been a different form of segregation, but it was segregation. And so what happened is Dr. King was on the phone. He would go into the basement. He was on the phone talking to Robert Kennedy. Robert Kennedy was the Attorney General at the time of the United States. And the mob just continued to get more violent. They began to shoot more bullets into the church, and soon Kennedy realized that the situation was really bad. So he sent about 600 U.S. Marshals. When the U.S. Marshals arrived, they were able to break up the huge mob, but the mob attacked them with bricks, bottles, uh, and bricks, bottles, and other kinds of missiles. Then the mob broke up into smaller groups. They went throughout the black community in large numbers, and they turned over cars. They shot into black people's homes, and they caused great damage in the black community. Now, what these people were these people were protecting a social order. They were protecting a social order. They had been also um, their anger and their anger and their fear had been stoked by segregationist leaders. Um, let's connect this to what happened in the Capitol. It is a continuation of this notion of white supremacy. It is a continuation of this notion that there are certain people who do not have value that certain people are not as valuable as others. There's a long legacy of these white mobs attacking people, attacking and getting away with it. This is not the first time. And so, what I want you to understand is that this has been a long struggle, a long battle. It is a continuing battle, uh, and to not be surprised. And I want to tell you that Dr. King and those brave people that took part in the civil rights movement moved the needle in the United States. And we have a long way to go. And I just want you to understand that and to know that and to reckon with that, um, and let it be our legacy in this generation that we will continue to understand who we really are, what it means to have true equality and true justice. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Peggy Johnson, and I go to Calvary, and I've been a part of Calvary together with my husband, Bill Finnerty, for the last 5 years. And I really miss going to church, being together in that building, singing in the choir, hanging out at the pub. Life's been hard with COVID for all of us. It's been isolating and, sometimes just lonely. And as if a global pandemic wasn't enough, last May we witnessed the murder of George Floyd. And it's not like this was the first Black American to be killed in our streets. Philando Castile, Jamar Clark, and so many, many others. But this murder shook us to the core and renewed a wake-up call to many white Americans, I think. And perhaps it was because it was so horrific. A modern day lynching right in our own backyard. We were forced to look squarely at the realities of a system that continues to injure and kill Black and brown bodies, our brothers and sisters. So after George Floyd, like many people, I began reading more about white supremacy and racism, began doing more soul searching, attending protests and Black Lives Matter rallies. And I also decided to become part of an anti-racism practice group together with friends, many from church, to learn and understand more about how we participate in white supremacy, how I participate, and how we can disrupt it in ourselves and in our communities. And we're using a book, I don't have it with me. It's called My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies by Resmaa Menakem. Resmaa is a therapist who specializes in trauma, body-centered therapy, and violence prevention. And he explains that our body is where our instincts reside and where we have the impulse to fight, to flee, or freeze when we are afraid. And he says the damage caused by racism will continue until we can learn to heal. Heal ourselves, heal the generational anguish of white supremacy that's deeply, deeply embedded in all of our bodies. So our collective agony doesn't just affect African Americans, although Black and brown bodies are the ones most impacted by the trauma and the violence now and for centuries. White Americans suffer a secondary trauma from seeing the trauma inflicted on people of color and from inflicting it knowingly and unknowingly and participating in a system that oppresses and damages and kills our fellow human beings. Resmaa says we don't just put on mountain climbing gear and surmount a racial divide. Instead, individually and collectively, we need to address our trauma and heal our bodies and hearts. It's not a problem that we can just reason away or think away or discuss away. So as we work through this book and begin to recognize our own biases, we're learning that dismantling racism from the inside out and uprooting the embedded mythology of white supremacy within is a living practice and a daily discipline. Even if we do it every day, it will take a lifetime. But our eyes are opening. We believe the Spirit will allow the scales to fall in order for us to continue to see the truth. And I came across a quote recently that said, either you find a way to oppose the evil, or the evil becomes part of you and you are a part of it. And it winds itself around your soul like the arms of an octopus. If I do not oppose it, I am responsible for its sins. Well, we still have much work to do to oppose this evil, this great evil, within ourselves, within our hearts, and in our communities. But I'm committed to that work, and I know there are many who are committed to this work. We pray for God's help and guidance.
Hello, everybody. This is Ricky Brown. Good afternoon and happy Martin Luther King's Day. And let me just say that Dr. King's life was a legacy, and it is a story of personal sacrifice, service to others for the greater good of all of us. Today, let's just remember his bold words and actions promoting freedom, justice, and equality for all. Let's follow in his footsteps by volunteering to serve our local communities. Together, let's honor his memory and make our neighborhoods a greater place to call home. Also, let's acknowledge in these turbulent times, in light of the activities that took place this summer here in Minneapolis with the killing of George Floyd, in a very tumultuous election year, and the most recent attack on our Capitol, that it is appropriate to heed the words of the Dr. Martin Luther King. And so to help us do that, I put together a slideshow with 5 quotes that I think speak to our times, and I hope you will find them helpful. I've asked Jackie to just run them for about 15 seconds each, and in silence, I hope it is my expectation that we all would heed to these words. So thank you and have a wonderful Dr. Martin Luther King's Day.
We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. I like this quote by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King because I feel like this advice is very important, whether it's regarding world affairs, the unrest in our country, civil rights in our city, and difficult times in our Calvary community, and even personal conflicts. It is always better if we are able to access and know this infinite hope.
Hi, I'm Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate.
Hello, Calvary. My name is Kira Williamson, and I have a quote to read for you today.
Okay, the quote I chose was, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that."
Say that darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that.
Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that.
We like this because it's true, and we think it's true because hate divides and love brings people together, and that's what we need desperately in our world right now.
This quote reminds me of God and how He always protects and makes sure that His people are okay. And because God has always been there for me in hard times, I know that I can count on Him to be there for me in the future as well. And I just know that I have to continuously try my best to love my neighbor as myself, no matter how rude or disrespectful my neighbor is to me. If I am the same to them, I am no different than them. And I always keep that in mind when someone's not being nice to me, or just when someone annoys me and I can't do anything about that except try my best to love them. And yeah, that quote really hits home, and ever since I read that, I have been thinking about that when I just do regular daily actions. And I hope that you think about that in the future as you decide what you want to do with your life and how you want to move forward in this year. That's all. Thank you.
And this is my favorite quote from Martin Luther King ever, because I remember in Sunday school, the youth pastor would teach us to love our enemy, and I would be so confused because I was like, well, they're your enemy. You're not supposed to get along with them. That's the whole point of having them be your enemy. You're supposed to hate each other. And I was like, well, that's not fair. Why do I have to be the bigger person all the time? Why do I always have to be the one that's kind to others if they aren't kind to me? And it wasn't until I read this quote that I really understood it. What I got out of it was that you can't fight fire with fire. And I feel like this quote is really relevant, like with everything that's going on right now, because everyone is so caught up on what side people are on, like whether or not they support this or that, and they're all forgetting that hating each other will only end in disaster. And the only way to break the cycle is to be kind to one another. And I think it's just a nice reminder for all of us to just love each other. And that's why that's my favorite quote. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Brown, and I'm excited to be back with you here at Calvary, honoring the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday celebration. Dr. Martin Luther King stands out as the voice of reason in the civil rights era, and not only that, but for life in general. He led a people, a nation, in the fight for equality and for freedom. He gave his voice, he gave his time, he gave his faith, and in 1968, Dr. King gave his life. He yet remains to be the role model for people everywhere who envision a world of liberty and justice for all. I'm honored to share with you one of his favorite selections, if I can help somebody. If I can help somebody as I travel alone, if I can cheer somebody with a word or my song, if I can show somebody they're traveling wrong, then my living shall not be in vain. If I can do my duty as a good Christian should, if I can bring God's beauty to a world that's wronged, if I can share God's message as the good master taught, then my living shall not be in vain. Then my living shall not be in vain. My living shall not be in vain. If I can show somebody they're traveling wrong, then my living shall not be in vain. Then my living, it shall not be in vain. My living, no, 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 it shall not be in vain. just want somebody as they travel alone, that my living shall not be in vain.
Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Pastor Jeff asked me to choose a quote of Dr. King's and speak a little bit about what it means to me, so I chose that one. Quotes attributed to King are legion, and many, like the one I just mentioned, are almost cliche by now. From "I have a dream" in his speech in Washington, D.C., to "I have been to the mountaintop" shortly before his murder, sadly, his legacy is too easily reduced to an inspirational poster. You know, I just ran across a long biographical article in the New York Times on Angela Y. Davis. For those of you who don't know her, look her up. It'll be well worth your time. In one part, the Times article talks about her coming out as lesbian. And in that context, Davis goes on to say, "We didn't include gender issues in earlier struggles. There would have been no way to imagine that trans movements would effectively demonstrate to people that it is possible to effectively challenge what counts as normal in so many different areas of our lives." And then the reporter writes, she smiles and says, "A part of me is glad that we didn't win the revolution we were fighting for back then, because there would still be male supremacy. There would still be heteropatriarchy. There would be all of these things that we had not yet come to consciousness about." Well, Davis's words remind me that we shouldn't put Dr. King into a box of "back then" or on a bumper sticker. In the spirit of his struggle, we need to keep our consciousness attuned to the many forms of injustice that people face. Injustice that we were not aware of 40 years ago or even 5 years ago. And I think Dr. King would have agreed. The Poor People's Campaign that launched just before his murder was emblematic of the expansion of his view of injustice. And I would like to think that Dr. King would have continued to be at the forefront in the struggle for justice by Black, brown, indigenous, poor, genderqueer, differently abled, and other marginalized groups, including justice for the air and the land, for trees and rivers. I guess, regardless whether you'd agree with that assertion, that's what Dr. King's words, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere," mean to me. Thank you.
The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "The hottest place in hell is reserved for those who remain neutral in times of great moral conflict." Wednesday, November 3rd, 2016 was one of the most morbidly depressing days of my life. And on Sunday, November 6th, 2016, I stood with many of you in the sanctuary of Calvary Baptist Church with a feeling of total hopelessness as we wondered, what has just happened to our country? Where is the moral compass of this country pointing? For 4 years, we have observed as one law after another has been openly broken, altered, or simply ignored. Civility and traditions that celebrate our country's true greatness were discarded. Racial and social injustices not only prevailed, but were encouraged from the loftiest offices of our government. But the most evil thing that permeated our society during these 4 years has been the incessant lies that have rained down on the citizens of this country from a group of self-serving, Philistine-like politicians and their minions. Athletes and others who practiced peaceful protest were scorned and their actions politicized. Our country became an outcast in the family of peaceful nations. White supremacists openly paraded in the streets. Young black men and women continued to be killed by members of the law enforcement community without any consequence. The economy crashed, and thousands of people lost their jobs, their homes, and many have had to resort to living in shelters and to surviving from food lines that stretch for blocks and blocks. Many businesses had to close and sadly may never open again. A pandemic of proportions that we have never seen has gone unchecked as millions have become infected and hundreds of thousands have died. All the while, this epidemic has largely been ignored by our president and his followers, but even more insidiously, he and his enablers have politicized and denied the existence of a total public health catastrophe, while lining their pockets and at the same time spreading their own disease in the form of one massive lie after another. I was born and raised during the old Jim Crow era in Atlanta, Georgia, where I saw racism, injustice, hate, and other things at their very worst. But I was always taught to believe in hope, that things would get better. Dr. King said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that." But I must confess that this new Jim Crow is far worse and has placed many minutes, hours, and days of despair on my spirit. But never so much as on January 6th, when a treasonous, racist mob of domestic terrorists, Nazis, white supremacists, Confederates, cowards, and murderers were allowed to invade and desecrate our nation's capital, all under the encouragement of our president, while his enablers and their minions remained silent. Dr. King said to ignore evil is to become accomplice to it. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. In closing, I would like to once again quote Dr. King as I wish all of you a happy and blessed King Day while hoping for brighter days and prosperity for us all. Out of the mountain of despair comes a stone of hope. Thank you very much.
Hey everybody, I want to come on at the near the end here tonight, at least of our video part of our service, and thank you again for joining in, and thank you to everybody who shared. We have one more video component of the service. Some of you have seen it and some of you probably have not, but after the unrest this summer and the death of George Floyd, Ricky Brown went throughout the Twin Cities and created a video of what he found to be hopeful art in the midst of a tragic death, of a lot of ugliness. And we wanted to end tonight on that hope and celebrating that hope. Hope is not burying our head in the sand or being in denial about the reality of life or about the complexity and the reality of the issues facing us today as a church and as a nation. But we are people of hope, and we are people of art, and we are committed to beauty, and we are committed to using beauty and art as part of our strategy to fight racism and injustice in our world. So we're going to end with Ricky's video. Thank you, Ricky, for your heart and for your work in this. I also want to mention that our elder board and our faith and justice team and our staff have all committed to using the first quarter of our year here at Calvary to keep discussions happening. That'll be through our sermon series. They'll be through small groups. There's going to be many opportunities. Those will be coming forward in the happenings. So please keep in tune. There are things that are going to be happening very soon. And there'll be things that are going to be happening throughout, again, the first quarter of our year and probably beyond. So thank you again. We'll end with this beautiful video, and then maybe we'll have some open Zoom time to discuss what we heard from our brothers and sisters tonight. God bless you guys. Thanks for joining in. Amen.
Good morning, everybody. This is Ricky Brown. Say, in the midst of all that has happened here in Minneapolis as a result of the killing of George Floyd, this past weekend I finally got the opportunity to travel around the city to view certain areas and to see how they were affected. While I witnessed lots of destruction, what touched me the most was the beautiful artwork created by the local artists and displayed on many of the buildings. Aside from the artwork itself, which is beautiful, it was the messages and the quotes on them that touched me most, because I believe they capture and represent the essence of hope for change going forward that can come from the chaos that was created here. I had my camera with me and I took lots of pictures, and I have put together a video that I hope will be encouraging and will serve as support for change going forward. Enjoy.
Sometimes it rains in the midst of your parade, and the hard times come after you had a great day. For with every test, there's a time and a season, and with every trial, purpose and reason. Sometimes you're hurting, there's a pain deep within. Seems like the more you pray, that thing just won't ever end. No, just have patience and heartache. When you're weak, say I'm strong. But this is a part of life's journey. Keep the faith and press on. Oh. Sometimes it's hard and your way seems dim. No, just keep on pressing on. Put your trust in Him. Learn to lay aside every weight, so easily beset you. For in the time you will come forth, for He is gonna bless you. He's God.